Good afternoon. This is Critical Talk with Professor Amina Al-Din on Muslim Network TV. Um, Lots of things to talk about today with my guests. As you know, colleges have been going back and forth about whether students stay on campus, whether they send everybody home. If some show up with positive tests, I kind of think that's dumb because then if they have positive tests, why you want to send them back home to infect everybody? But then again, what do I know? Also, students are in a quandary, especially those who have paid for boarding, those who have paid for meal plans, those who are in courses where there's a need for a lab, those who are in courses where the hope is that they really get to meet the professor for future references, etc. Also, especially with Muslim students, but with all students, I'm sure, chaplains have become the resident psychologists. So whether they can reach them on campus or they have to go to Zoom or otherwise, we have a new branch of psychology. So today, to talk to all about all of this, in addition to the elections and the feelings on campuses, I have with me Umar Badwa, who is the director of Muslim Life in the chaplain's office at Yale. He earned his graduate certificate in Islamic chaplaincy from Hartford Seminary and has been engaged in religious service, social activism, and education outreach ever since 2000 when he was 2 years old. The beard is a fake, y'all.
Yeah.
He received his MA in Near Eastern Studies with a specialization in Islamic Studies from Cornell. Amina Darwish, and I should say doctor, but I should also say Imana. Did I get it right? Did I mess it up?
No. Yes.
Um, is the Muslim Life Coordinator at Columbia. She has ijazas, traditional Islamic studies certifications from the the Kuala Seminary, in Dallas, Texas, and the Critical Loyalty Seminary in Toronto, Ontario. She also has a PhD in chemical engineering before switching careers to follow her true passion of community building. I think you could do a little bit of both. And as you were trying to help me with my webcam, some of the old stuff still remains. Lots of stuff to talk about, but first, I think I want to start with how is the mood on your campuses? Either one?
I'm happy to just kind of jump in. So thank you so much to inviting us back. It's great to see friends and colleagues. So Bismillah, what I would say is that, we are there's two crises that are going, sort of coterminously. One is the global pandemic, which we're all part of, and I know we're gonna get deeper into this. Is that there's just general anxiety and stress across campuses for students, for staff, for faculty, for all the people that inhabit the orbit of the university and colleges. Number one, and then we're also in an incredibly contentious political cycle right now with an election looming in 3 weeks, and it's been an incredibly vitriolic election season with so much at stake and all of that. So I think both of those sort of have are intersecting right now. So to answer Dr. Amina's question is that there's widespread stress and anxiety, I think, on campuses. I'm going to put that out there.
I think I completely agree with all of that. Also, thank you for having us back. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Oh no, this is a pleasure for me.
I appreciate it. But I mean, I agree, the pandemic, the election, but I think also on top of that, just as human beings, a lot of our students are back home with families, and whatever your family dynamics are, they're now dealing with. Whatever communities they had in their home, wherever their parents live, is also another added just an
Mhm.
added layer of complexity.
Mhm.
We're in New York, so we got hit a lot harder than a lot of other places. So there's a very real level of respect for we know we have to quarantine, we have to make sure everybody's safe. Our campus lost students, lost staff, we lost people in our Columbia community, and it's been really painful.
Oh,
And we haven't had the time to really mourn that in a way that we normally would have come together and mourned people, but now we can't.
yeah.
So there's still, I feel like, a lot of unresolved things, a lot of open-ended things, and there's unfortunately has been very little closure for all of these huge questions that have come up.
Mhm.
Wow, that's an important point. I am now doing a medical volume on Muslims and COVID 19. And
Mhm.
in doing some research, one of the things that came out of New York in religion dispatches in the New Yorker was the complaints of physicians and being overworked, 12-hour shifts,
Mhm.
not enough PPE, the fact that families could not be with loved ones as they were dying, the
Mm,
horrendous mental breakdown some people had when they saw the refrigerated trucks
Mhm.
arriving
Mhm.
to keep the dead bodies. And then when they found out that prisoners were being used in the escort of those bodies to
Mhm.
paupers' graves, especially in New York. But also, I ran across an article which added to my angst, and that was by some medical students who wanted hazard pay because they had been taken out of medical school, out of their regular traditional rotation, and put on the front lines. And they're
Mhm.
saying, oh my God, my medical coverage is not going to cover this.
Mhm.
um, I need hazard pay because I am more likely now to die than in a car accident on the
Mhm.
street. And the university system locked arms and was adamantly refusing them hazard pay. And I thought about universities, and not the university system, but it's a kind of university system, but Bellevue and all the hospitals there in New York. But I thought about universities. Um, some permitted the hiring of adjunct professors, a few of them, but almost all of them shut down on new hires.
mhm,
Uh,
Mhm.
Teachers, professors fought tooth and nail trying with themselves, trying to learn how to do again um, remote learning. Some universities were silly enough to change the platforms that they had
Mhm.
midstream, which
Mhm.
meant that professors had to learn a new way of going. And then I thought about chaplains. What are chaplains doing? Because the students still, whether you're home or there, have access to you.
Mhm.
What are they talking about?
Mhm. I mean, fantastic laying out sort of the issues. What I would say, just to sort of take the first stab at it, is that all of that and the and else, right, is that they're it's coming from. Let's talk about health concerns, right? Students themselves may be immunocompromised. They live with people, family members, close friends that are immunocompromised. I have immunocompromised people in my family. They so there's one concern. Finance is another. I mean, our economy is decimated, right? So many people, they said before they
Not
lived.
according to your president.
We,
What the president is not.
that's a whole can of worms which we can get to in a little bit, right? But what I would say is that so many people, like they have food insecurity issues, they have employment insecurity issues, and what this is on, our students are young adults, or they're in a world right now that's surrounded by all of these multiple stressors, and this is not only affecting their mental health, but their physical health, their physical well-being, and as we would talk about as chaplains, is their spiritual well-being. And on top of that, like they have to worry about all these problems, and then they have to take like organic chemistry and like advanced calc and like French poetry, and then try to get an A or do something
Yeah,
smart.
yeah,
Like it's just so overwhelming. So my heart goes out. I know that I speak for my colleagues that our hearts go out to our students because they are just dealing with things that I think are almost unimaginable. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll turn it over, is that in some ways what this is allowed, right? Like Zoom and
Mhm.
streaming and phones, is to say that so much of our work is relational, face to face, heart to heart with
Right.
people. But we have to pivot, and we have to pivot to know that I'll just say this, is that I've been doing we obviously can't do community events. I've been doing a lot more one-on-ones, phone calls, Zoom calls, even texting hours, checking in on people. How are you? How's it going at home? I'm around if you need to just connect with someone, talk,
Right.
and whatnot. But I'd love to hear from Imamina, thoughts.
Agreed, and in the same way that other institutions have been hit, universities, and we are privileged to be in universities that have large endowments.
Yeah.
Other universities don't. Other universities depend on the boarding of those students to pay
Right.
people. So
Right.
there are a number of universities across the country that started having to furlough people.
Yeah.
And if you're going to furlough people, you're not going to furlough the professors because you need them to run the classes. You're going to furlough staff. You're going to furlough maybe, hopefully not the psychological services, hopefully not the chaplains, hopefully not the counselors.
Uh,
But
yeah.
at the same time, the university, the financial strain on universities and the financial models for a lot of universities across the country has been unhealthy for years. And
Mhm.
now the pandemic has just made it so
Mhm.
much worse.
Mhm.
And I agree with Ahmed. I've had a lot more one-on-one. We have I still try to do office hours on Zoom. We used to have chai chats on once a week, and we would come together and we drink tea. Now you
Mhm.
watch me fidget with my coffee machine and
Mhm.
try to make us, but it's
What are
still
they talking about? What are they talking about?
everything under the sun.
Yeah.
Well, tell me some of it. I'm nosy, and I
I,
don't know your students.
I think a lot of the existential things that you didn't necessarily have time to think about, now you have time to think about.
Yeah.
So I
So,
feel like even the questions have gotten harder and bigger as we went through.
Mhm.
such as you all are being so damn evasive. I feel like I'm on a
No, I
damn.
mean, I'll can I jump in. Is that okay?
Huh?
Is that I mean exactly what Amina said, is that it's the things that that our students, it's not that they weren't aware of these things, but they push them to the back of their head, right? It's that the message for so many students is like, look, in these 4 years that you're there as an undergraduate or however many as a graduate student, your primary focus is on getting good grades, on learning what you need to learn,
Mhm.
making the network connections, getting the letters of recommendation, right? Because these are stepping stones in your process of your professional development
Right.
and intellectual development. Now, not only do we expect them to do that, but they are worried about a sick parent. If people that don't have healthcare coverage, they're worried about, am I going to be able to pay tuition? Then one debate, which we alluded to, but we'll talk about right now, is that, and I wanted to say this before, from my perspective, for what it's worth, and I also am very cognizant of the fact that Aman and I are at extremely well endowed institutions, right? Which is actually very atypical, because a lot of the analysis that's coming out is that this is going to really just destroy the landscape of smaller colleges and for that matter, even large public institutions, right, are struggling with public funding. What I mean to say is students are now struggling with the fact of saying, is it even worth it? Like, is it worth like going through all of this stress? Why don't I take a gap year? Why don't I just write it off? But what is that going to do? Is that going to set me back if I go home? I'm another mouth to feed for my family members. Where do I end up? Some students, they actually have, like Amina said, they have a insecure home situation. Being at home is actually more unstable and more problematic for them. So they actually, in many ways, petition universities to say, I need to live on campus. I need access to a meal plan. I need
Yeah.
a bed, and room.
Well, one of the things I think that we overlook is that a lot of students, even students who have professional parents, the vagaries of life have changed for some of those professional parents.
Mhm.
Law institutions downsized. Um, Lawyers and physicians also owned as a way of ensuring income restaurants,
Mhm.
small stores, boutiques, and other things, which had to shut down during the pandemic, for which they had to continue to pay the mortgages for.
Mhm.
Some of them being large as apartment buildings.
Mhm.
Some hospitals, believe it or not, had the audacity to furlough physicians.
Mhm.
So a lot of engineers, lots of people, roads people, what do they call that? Materials engineering, shut down.
Mhm.
Although that would have been a great time to repair the roads, but
Yeah.
nevertheless, um, students who had not ever seen themselves in want found themselves in want.
Yes.
Mhm.
Um, Students who were already marginally in want were even in
Mhm.
greater want.
Yeah.
So, what I'm asking you is I spoke with one of the psychologists at the Khalil Center, and we talked about the rates of suicide going up, how parents were, because parents are depressed and anxious, how
Mhm.
they were unable to note changes in behavior of students because everybody's depressed and anxious.
Mhm.
Bullying is still going on social media
Mhm.
as young people try to reach out to have some kind of, I don't know how they consider social media human contact, but some sort of human contact,
Mhm.
sending pictures, I'm doing this, that, and the other. But if they get commented on poorly, then they're up the creek.
Mhm.
Domestic violence between parents
Mhm.
who ever hadn't ever had to share the same space for weeks at a time
Mhm.
has gone through the roof, but so has the abuse of children
Mhm.
who get on your last nerve, and now everybody's willing to bow down at the feet of preschool and elementary
Mhm.
school teachers. It's like, can you please come get them? So,
Mhm.
what are these college students saying? We were talking about some young adults, but mostly about adults and how they were perceiving their children, this forever opening refrigerator and the refusal to pick up after themselves and the refusal to even do things like take a shower. I'm not going anywhere. Take a shower
Mhm.
anyway. The rest of us want to live till you get to go somewhere. You
Mhm.
know, it was all of these uh, little things. Some older siblings found themselves in the enviable position of having to, especially college students, to monitor the remote work of younger siblings
Mhm.
and remote work that they don't know how to do because they're not teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to me, guys.
Yeah. I mean,
I agree. The relationships have been so a lot more there's a lot more expectations of the family relationships that you do have. One of it's funny, my sister has 4 kids and she says the hardest thing about parenting is convincing children of personal hygiene. And this is like every parent is trying to do this, and at the same time, every child is like,
Not to do it. Yeah.
yeah. But then when you become a young adult, your biggest thing is recognizing your parents as human beings.
Yeah.
yeah.
They are human beings, they make mistakes, they
Mhm.
fail. Is this a healthy relationship? Is this not a healthy relationship? How
Mhm.
do I understand how I can build a relationship with my parents? How do I set a healthy boundary? How do I those are the questions that came up over and over again. And also how, as a family member that is now living here, we have to divide up chores.
Mhm.
We have to divide up we have to and part one of the chores is helping a younger sibling figure out which link it is for the class. That
Mhm.
is just it's just so taxing on the family because never before have like not never before. They haven't up until this point figured out how as a family to work as a unit. So there's a point before agriculturally when you had a farming family, everybody just took a turn and you divided up the chores
Right.
and
Mhm.
that was a normal part of family life. It hasn't
Right.
been a normal part of modern family life for a long
Right.
time, and now it
Right.
is.
Mhm.
How do you contribute as much as you can and still feel valued?
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, these are fantastic, fantastic points. Kind of two thoughts that I'll just put out there is this is a super reality check. And what I mean by that is at two levels. One is that the system has not been working and is unsustainable, like at every level, like our political economy, our the way we've structured, higher education and access to education, the way we've structured employment, like the system is just what the virus and the resultant pandemic has done is laid bare, like we've sort of like taken away the curtain to like all of these disease spots within, the body politic, so to speak. That's number one. And the other thing that I want to put out there is that, from our tradition, and I know both of you are scholars, you can speak to this better than I can, but like the idea of fitna, if we're in fitna, right? Allahu alam, God knows best if this is a trial or a tribulation. But one of the things that happens in a tribulation is that it really brings out what is within us, right? It's almost an unveiling of what we have within ourselves as individuals, how my nafs, right, and the lack of discipline of my nafs, of my ego and my desires, how I failed or has tried to succeed to do that. So what fitna in my own personal life is like, now I get to see without any sort of cover, like, this is who I really am. This is what I care about. This is what I don't do. This is why I'm lazy. This is why I'm selfish. This is why I'm narcissistic. This is why all these things. And then what it does is, if you want to magnify that at a macro level, it's showing us as a community and as a society, these are the systemic problems, right? And I don't introduce another topic, but the levels of structural violence, the structural racism, the structural inequality that our society has perpetuated for hundreds of years is now like it's staring us in the face. And granted, this is a lot for a human mind to process, but we've kicked the can down the road too long.
We're going to come right back to that point. I happen to see the time as a reckoning. So I would ask you to consider that.
Yeah.
And as we talk about spiritual obligations, not what is a spiritual obligation, what is not a spiritual obligation, and the sides many in your universe have been forced to take. You got to take a side. We'll be back in a few moments.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me!
No justice!
No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world? You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned have brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
Welcome back. This is Professor Amin Al-Din. I have the privilege of being with Omar Bajwa and Dr. Amina Darwish, and we're talking about everything we can think of and the future of universities. I have thought of this as a reckoning, and I wanted to think about, because it's all over various pieces of the news, and students, I'm sure, are getting hit with it because some organizations are directing, Muslim organizations are directing themselves to Muslim students. And some of those I was reading about, and they want to push what they're calling a progressive agenda. I'm not quite sure what that means, no more than I'm sure what conservative or liberal mean anymore. But I think that students are trying to find where they draw their line in the sand. How could I have been praying all this time, first at my parents' behest, not really thinking about the fact that you can't really get on the path to Islam until you reach an age where you can think about it, but have followed the path because that's what my family does, and it's what's expected of me. And now I'm not sure, because I've been praying all this time, and I'm still up the creek, not only without a paddle, but also without a boat.
Yeah.
I so agree. One of the beauties and the benefit of having a college campus is that you have such a diversity of where Muslims are the most ethnically diverse religious group on the campus. Up to, I think, a third of our Columbia students are actually international students.
Right.
So the diversity of the students that we have on campus, it it's such a beautiful, rich conversation. But at the same time, just fighting to make space for everyone and make it as welcoming and as accepting and inclusive as we humanly possibly can. And then they go back to their family communities, and the masjid might not be as welcoming as they had hoped.
It is.
Yeah.
Or
Go ahead.
yes. Or
Go
even
ahead.
if it is, a lot of the times it's like a single ethnicity, or this is what it means to be Muslim. Part of being Muslim in this part of the community is only eating biryani. That is like that. Like I don't understand how and why. So I'm really grateful that a lot of my students went back to their communities, started to challenge things, and some of them would call and be like, "Oh, the imam's angry with me now," and I'm like, "Well, what happened?"
Well,
And they,
I would also, and in another show, I don't know if it was a show or a course I was teaching, I would challenge some of these imams.
Mhm.
Um, Many of them got their credentials somewhere else, which has nothing to do with here. They have not kept up with what is going on here, and even though they derive their livelihood here, they know nothing about the history of this place.
Yes.
And one book I continuously recommend, especially for chaplains, that you read is Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. But because students in families where all of the monies and the important things happen on another continent, it is hard to settle here. The plurality also provides dissonance. It's too many people to know. How am I supposed to know all these people? But in many cultures, especially inside of the Islamic community, one thing, whether you're Arab or from South Asia, you're supposed to hate Black folks. The other thing is on the African continent, in many countries, it is also you're supposed to hate American Black folks because they haven't taken, you can't see that there's systemic racism. So you figure they just haven't taken of or availed themselves to all that they could have availed themselves to get out of the problem. I see chaplains as having several roles. One of is the in-house psychologist when they cut off psych services or they get overwhelmed. But it's also the spiritual advisor. And in the spiritual advisor, I've talked to physicians and this research I'm doing who talked about their spirituality waxing and waning, who talked about, oh, it's a fight to make prayer. And now I'm seeing prayer as a habitual ritual that I don't know if I'm doing what I'm supposed to do in prayer. Some others have said, well, I prayed more. And I said, okay, well, when did you get anything else done? And that was the dilemma. I can stay in prayer forever. But like a famous Black woman said, you can pray until you faint, but if you don't get up and do something, God is not going to lay it in your lap. So what you going to do? I mean, we still are in the midst of trauma. The policeman who put his knee on George Floyd's neck got bail. And not only did he get bail, he was given permission to leave the state. So what do we do with all of this? And like Omar said earlier, the pandemic plus protests have peeled back layers of stuff that America has been covering for a few hundred years. Yes. How does one work with that with our future leaders?
Yeah, subhanAllah. No, thank you for that. I mean, I'll just take a quick stab at it, which is that, two sort of thoughts that I'll put out there that I share with my students is to be, people want authenticity and they want honesty, right? Even if they say that they don't, I think the heart is yearning for this, right? And the mind is as well, especially if you're in college, right? And what I mean by that is that we need to present an honest they're looking at the world and they're looking at our community as my colleague said, Amna, like they're just seeing like all this disconnect, right? So what we need to do is be honest with them and say, look, we have a beautiful and dignified history of the Sira of the Prophet Sallallahu and the people that he trained and the people that he left behind. But the Muslim community, like the Muslim history, has high points and low points. And the reason I mentioned that in particular is that we have still, it's a question, and I'm not saying that I in any way take credit of this. Many amazing people that generations before me talked about the idea of Islamic literacy, right? We have young people today that are Islamically illiterate. They come with a very immature and very kind of like Sunday school idea of Islamic history and what it means to be Muslim and all of that. And they're spiritually infantilized, right? And I'm not saying this to knock anyone. I'm just pointing out what I see as an observation. But then the second part that I want to talk about, it is our responsibility and for the work that we do to serve the community, to help develop a nurturing, loving community and make them feel belonged. We love you. You belong here. Everyone is at a different point in their spiritual, intellectual journey. And we're willing as chaplains to walk with you on that journey. And as you confront the world or the world confronts you, it's a stress test, right? What you came in as a teenager, as a high school student, now as a college student or as a young adult, is that spiritual identity is going to get, your mettle is going to be tested. Whether you or I like it or not, regardless of your race, of your gender, of your class, like the system out there is meant to grind you up. And what we need to do is prepare our hearts and our minds, right, with our students and our communities to say, we have tawakkul on Allah, but we have to develop that tawakkul, that we're going to get through this, right? So
I so agree. And I think the other part of it is also recognizing that in the Sunday school version of Islam that they got, there were a lot of Black voices that were erased. There were a lot of women that were erased.
Yeah.
There was so much of even just the Islamic history of America, of the Muslims that landed here before Columbus, that were doing what Muslims do. They were trading and they were doing dawah. They were teaching people their religion through their ethics, through their how they carried themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And even with the transatlantic slave trade, some of them were scholars.
Mm-hmm.
Not just literate and educated. They were scholars. They were doctors. They were engineers. They were lawyers. They were whole human beings that were contributing to society and helped build this country. And it's purely by the response of their prayer to God that any of us are here. Mm-hmm. This is the spiritual legacy of America.
Mm-hmm.
We don't.
But then what do you do? And we're going to take a break, but I want to know, once you know that, what do you do with it? How do you interpret it? One of the things that is going about is this further separation of the immigrant communities, various ethnic immigrant communities, from the African American, Native, and Latinx communities. So I want to take a break. This is Professor Amina Al-Din with Omar Bajwa and Dr. Amina Darwish, and we're talking about great stuff. Join us again.
Assalamu alaikum!
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's World because it makes me happy. What? No. And here's Adam and here's Anissa. Adam and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is very smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
Assalamu alaikum. You are back with Critical Talk, the future of universities and everything else on the planet. with Professor Amina Al-Din, Omar Bajwa, and Dr. Amina Darwish. Where did I leave off?
You were talking to us. You posed a really timely and fantastic question about, some of the observations is that there's a growing rift between the quote unquote community and the indigenous community, and what do we do with that with our students on campus? That was the kind of
I was thinking about both of you. Yale is in Connecticut. Last I looked. Columbia is still in New York, despite the efforts of the pandemic to get rid of New York. I was talking online, well, actually over email, with a First Nation Muslim American who says the Muslim community has not reached out to them at all. Whereas before, when I was in college, Muslims made Native Americans a priority as people who had a similar history. It was more tragic, but who wants to compare tragedies? But the Muslim community had not reached out to them at all. And you're talking about well-endowed universities, your Muslim chaplains. Do you talk to your students about the Native American communities, which the pandemic has devastated?
Great question. I mean, I'll just take a quick stab at it. Is that, I'm very blessed. I've been at Yale for 12 years, going on 13. And in those 12 years, I have the rank of a dean/director. And so I have developed long-term relationships we have 3 cultural centers on campus: the Native American Cultural Center, the La Casa, and the AFAM Cultural Center. And so, great professional relationships and personal friendships with the directors of those centers there's a 4th center, the Asian American Center on campus. And so our students, at least in the time that I've been here, actively pushed and encouraged to co-sponsor and collaborate as much as they can with these 4 different cultural centers. And the last thing I'll say, and I want to turn it over to my colleague, is, and this is, I think, a thread, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think Amina would agree with me on this, is that so much of the role that we as chaplains are expected to inhabit properly is we are expected to model positive behavior. Right, so it's on me to develop that personal collegiality and relationship with other minorities on campus and minority leaders on campus, student and professional leaders on campus, so that my students should be able to look at me and to say that someone in a quote unquote position of authority, right, is showing us perhaps what maybe they didn't see in their home community back home. Right, and we do it, inshallah, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that's the burdens on us, right? First and foremost.
I mean, I agree. I haven't been at Columbia as long as Hamad has been at Yale, so we're still in the very early phases of working to build those relationships. But I agree, setting the example and the standard. I would specifically go out to visit the historic mosques in the area, which in Harlem, a lot of them are historically Black masajid. So me trying to build a relationship with the imam and talking about it and incorporating into a lot of my discussions, hopefully then the students are like, wait, I never prayed there. Went out of their way to go pray there, went out of their way to go eat there. So just even if it's just simply incorporating into things as like, this is normal. When my students, as I'd mentioned, they went back to their home communities, and they were saying, hey, we need to go to these protests and we need to support Black lives. And again, if someone in your family is immunocompromised, by all means, do not go to the protest. There's so many other ways that you can support to be that you can support the anti-racism movement without necessarily going to a protest. And it's a matter of like, such as predominantly Black schools are underfunded. As a college student, you can go tutor students. You can support people. You can help them organize field trips. I worked at an inner city high school for a year, and inner city is just it was a term for a Black school in a predominantly white neighborhood. There were police officers outside of the school at all times as the disciplinary measure, just waiting for a teenager to lose their temper, which teenagers do all the time.
Right.
It just, I feel like I read about the school to prison pipeline. I was standing in front of it.
Yeah.
It was so jarring. But again, going back to the Muslim community, every time I go back to my masjid, after being in the school, I'm like, where are the Muslims?
Well, that becomes a question, especially during the pandemic when we were given simple tasks like washing your hands. And in both Canada and here, many of the reservations do not have running water. The pandemic has spread like wildfire. There have been, out of all of the groups taking food to the reservation, Muslims have not been one of them. So, and we can't do, nor can we rely on what we used to do when we could see each other face to face. We're going to have to morph that into something also. I'm not sure what that something is. There are still protests where everybody's wearing a mask. There have been some protests led by religious leaders. Muslims have not been there. And the student leaders, Muslims have not been there either. So if they're being told, don't go to the protests for all of the reasons people don't go to protests, I don't understand this because then I have to ask, pursuing justice is never comfortable. You know, you can't go to school and tutor students. You have to enter into a system now to be available to tutor them, unless you're talking about tutoring one's own community. So I'm challenging you to break out of your boxes and think of something else. I mean, if I could walk, I probably would be at a protest. So I don't understand Muslims not being in protest. I don't understand that.
Yeah, no, I mean your point is well taken, Professor Amna. But one thing that I just want to point out and is that as someone who has a background in media criticism, and I mean you have written so much on Islam, Muslims, in the media, so I want to acknowledge that. Is I think part of the challenge now that we're in is that we live in such a fragmented media and biased media environment. Not that we haven't before, but what I mean to say is this: is that I believe while I'm willing to entertain the argument that at national level, high profile, with all 1,000 cameras on events, Muslim religious leaders or quote unquote authorities may not be visible at those. I think we can actually flip the script. I know just through a lot of my own networks, professionally and personally, is that at the local level, really, I mean, we're not seeing people at the top, but really at the local level, so many MSAs, right? And the way to find out about this is if you're on TikTok or Instagram, is that so many MSAs are on these social media platforms and they're doing Instagram takeovers where MSAs are sharing their stories like we're doing this and you're doing that, and they're really inspiring each other. And I'm gonna say, I'm not like, they're not listening to, I mean, I talk about this in my khutbah every week, but I want to give them credit, the young people credit, is that they're doing it out of their own passion, their own drive, and they will, when they're back home for the last 6 months, in their local community, they're like, look, maybe some of you all are not going to come to the protest with us. Maybe some of the people from the masjid may not, but we're going to do it. I'm going to go with my college friends, with my MSA friends, with my AFAM community friends. And so I've just anecdotally heard and seen a lot of that, which is very heartwarming. It's very inspiring. It's just unfortunate that it doesn't get highlighted as much. And I'm going to say something provocative here, right? Is that, to your point, is that we also have to reckon with the fact there are certain voices in the American Muslim leadership community that have publicly used their platform to push back on why they should not be going to protest against BLM and a number of things. That is the challenge that people like, Ustaza Amina and I, we're dealing with that. Like, that, so that's true, it exists. But I think at sort of almost, if you go to the grassroots, a lot of MSA kids, they feel it, they see it, they want to be an active agent of change, and they're trying the best that they can. So
I agree. And I think college students, the beauty of that age is the level of idealism that they have, where there's a generation that is saying, they're saying, oh, the next generation will fix it. College students are like, no, we're going to fix it. It's going to be us. We're not waiting for our kids to do it.
Yeah.
What is it going to take? How are we going to get there? What should we do? What is everything that I can be doing within my power? And it's so inspiring to see. And it's actually why I feel like no matter where I go, I keep coming back to the college age kids just because of their idealism. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
the other thing that we did, one of my students is doing Engineers Without Borders, and they will specifically do this with groups overseas. It's really important to also be working with indigenous communities. You can have a team with the number of engineers we have in the Muslim community.
Yeah.
Why aren't there teams of people that are trying to help them with their challenges for water? Why aren't people going to Flint trying
Well, I think it's because Muslim leadership is not directing them there. And this is what one Muslim man said to me. You know, it's always about overseas. It's always about overseas. It's always about overseas with them. You know, so we're being abandoned. So what are we supposed to do with that as Muslims? You can go all the way from here to Marrakesh or to Kuala Lumpur or somewhere Islamabad to help fix a well or to build something, but you can't come up the road.
Yeah.
And those communities where the federal government has abandoned and restructured so many treaties, and it recently made the casinos, the money that comes from the casinos and stuff, the money so the federal government wouldn't have to give them any. It made it their allocations of it the budget for the tribe. So with no casinos and nothing open during the pandemic, communities were decimated. And it is not as easy as it even is for the undocumented to think about applying for welfare, right? Because technically they live on reserved land, not in the United States, although technically they are U.S. citizens, not acted upon as such. But that was a question, and it's very, very disturbing. Muslims, some parts of the community seem intent on the Muslim world. This is not the Muslim world. This is the United States of America. And there is a lot of confusion over what will it take to focus on the United States of America, except to push to try to be white. Short of that, what will it take to get Muslims focused here, to revamp their assignment of imams to people whose focus is where they are? Because technically, you can't even give them fatwa, some advice, unless you know the territory you're in. So why over there? You know, this man said to me, and I was so embarrassed. He said, "You all are jumping up and down about the Rohingya. What about us?"
Yeah.
And I, you know, what can I say?
No, I mean, I think I really appreciate your speaking very uncomfortable truths, right? That I think that I know Amina, we've worked together for many years, is that I think we're very aware of this, like, and we have this conversation with our students. But what, to your point, I'll add something else, and I'll just kind of put it out food for thought, is you ask a critical question, is like, when are we going to see changes in board structure of masajid, of Islamic centers, of communities, of leadership, and all of that? One of the things that I'm observing, right, amongst this really incredibly dynamic, intelligent, vibrant Muslim Generation Z, right, that's out there, is in Generation Z voices, is they're getting to the point now where it's like, if they feel that those systems are irreparable, you cannot, they feel we can't go back, you can't change that system. You know, if they're charitable, they'll say, it's great, those ammus, those uncles, 40, 50 years ago, they established those suburban mosques or whatever it is, right? That still have the same politics and still have the same board people that are running decades later. They're you know what the attitude is? They're going to say, we're ready to pivot. We're going to make our own community. We're going to make a third space, whatever you want to call it. They're like, we're not waiting for that train to get moving again. We're just going to build our own tracks and make our own train heading another direction, because I mean, the sense of urgency of now, right, is that they say we are, you know, we're so exhausted with, you know, all the problems we see in the Muslim community as well as in greater society, and they want to bring change. So I think it's almost like a reckoning lowercase r for some of the folks in charge to say, look, if you're not getting with a different program, you've been doing the same thing over and over again, there's people who are going to start a whole new program. and they're
No,
ready to.
I agree, and I
Yeah.
think I was just thinking. I just did a program last week, believe it or not, on Cuties.
Yeah,
Do you know Cuties?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
You haven't watched it?
No.
Chicken. Anyway, and one of the things one of the young Muslims said to me was, Dr. Amina, nobody who's an adult really wants to deal with all of the things that young people are confronted with. And I said, well, I'll take it on. It's no problem because I see some well, I used to see some bad results in the emergency room. When a kid can't go to a parent, they definitely can't go to the family doctor because he knows everybody in the community with various issues. And Cuties, a young Senegalese woman, made this film, and she's young, and you can tell she's young in that the mature things that could have been done in the film were not done. But everybody starts off somewhere. So she wanted to address the issues of polygyny, um, child sexual abuse, um, pornography, and in a way, she wanted to address the problems when young people from overseas come here and the conflicts between a traditional family and themselves who are growing up here. And the girl in Cuties is junior high, the time when everything happens, the hormones happening, the bullying happens, everything you can think of happens. And she wanted to be liked, she wanted to belong. That happens again in college.
Yeah.
How if we never deal with, I mean, we had a fantastic conversation. You should go back and look at the conversation. How if you never deal with it, if those in leadership aren't watching what their children are watching, how are we going to handle it?
I don't think it's just about leadership. I think when we see the immigrant community not actually addressing American Muslim issues, they're being ignorant of their own children.
Yeah.
And there's a widening gap between a lot of Muslim immigrant parents and their own children. And not having these conversations as a family, not having these conversations of if I used to work for a youth organization. They were 12 to 18-year-olds. This is the point where they have the capacity to ask, what is the purpose of life? How do we know Allah exists? And they come home to their parents and they say, what is the purpose of life? How do we know Allah exists? And they're like, oh no, you forgot everything I taught you in 14 years. They didn't. They're just genuinely asking the question for the very first time. And not being like, and this is to Amar's point, when we were talking about Islamic scholarship, our tradition has been discussing this and has there's a rich history of this. And usually it happens for 14-year-olds. When we talk to 14-year-olds in our Muslim community, we're so dismissive of them. We're so like, what do you know anyway? And if that's how you're treating, you've just made yourself the masjid, that leadership, that parent, in terms of that child's spiritual journey, you've just made yourself irrelevant.
Exactly.
You have those spaces, and we're so fortunate to have be chaplains at universities. The vast majority of Muslims don't have chaplains they go to.
That's
the
very
imam has necessarily given the, and it's always it has to be only a man in the masjid. And there's so many layers to this. They can't ask their parents, who are they asking? And I don't mean to be alarmist, but I think up to a third of Muslim, like people that are born to Muslim families in America, end up leaving Islam.
Yeah.
The model hasn't worked. The model has epically failed. If you lose 1 in 3, we're not, what are we doing?
Well, I want to come back to this topic, not this time, but at a future date. I'm just going to harass you all to pieces to talk about how do we talk about sensitive issues. I've been propelled and pushed by some younger folk. Some are freshmen in college, some are still in high school, to put these questions forth. And for today's conversation, I want to thank both of you for a lively, as usual, conversation, even though we're also almost at the last moment, but you folks are so good. And I would love you to give us your permission to call you back again